Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry, send me you time. Arsenal. Come on, you gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Simiu. Happy Monday to you all. We're nearly past the international break. Few more games, few more days. Arsenal back in action at the weekend. But the international break always provides a great opportunity to sit down and work our way through some of your unpopular Arsenal opinions. This is Volume 2 of our Unpopular Arsenal Opinions series. And what I've been doing is collating some of your unpopular opinions from the replies in an X post that I put out yesterday and from Instagram. What I've tried to do is I've tried to pick 6 or 7, I think, of unpopular opinions that don't really clash with one another, because there's a lot of unpopular opinions that have been submitted that are with relation to the same subject. So I don't want to be repeating myself throughout the show, but there were so many submissions. So thank you so much to everybody that got in touch via X or via Instagram. Really do appreciate it. So what are we going to do exactly this morning? We're going to sit down, sipping on a cup of green tea. By the way, everybody tells me that green tea is very good for you. I've not really been on the green tea hype, but some friends of mine that are far more across the whole wellness thing than I am say it's really good for you. So I'm going to start with the green tea, and we're going to work our way through some unpopular opinions while sipping on this very hot cup of green tea. I should have let it cool down a bit first. Anyway, thank you to everyone who's joining us live. Don't worry, if you've got your own unpopular opinions, you can chuck them into the chat box and we'll pick up some of yours as the show goes on as well. I've left some time specifically to take some from you guys in the live chat as well. So really looking forward to that. Lots and lots of comments about my lack of a beard. Yeah. We went through this yesterday. My beard's gone. It's grown back though, to be fair. Like I was clean shaven basically like on Friday. So it's grown back rapidly. The hair's gone as well. I know. I had a moment of madness. As I said on yesterday's show, I don't think I've had more messages or replies to anything than I have about this beard and hair business. So yeah, apparently I don't look like me anymore. That's what my 4-year-old daughter told me, and that's what a good friend of mine texted me this morning. He's actually texted me about 6 times saying, "What the F have you done?" And then he sort of lets it rest for like 24 hours. And I think, oh, he's over it now. He's not gonna get on my case again. And then he does. He says it again and again and again. So I realize that it's a monumental change that people are struggling to get their heads around. Anyway, let's dive in then to some of your unpopular Arsenal opinions, because there are some really good ones. And I want to start off with this one from Laura Kirk Francis. Laura's got a fantastic account. She puts together some unbelievably funny videos over on X. So make sure you go over and give her a follow. Now, Laura's unpopular Arsenal opinion is: the atmosphere at the Emirates is no worse than the majority of other grounds, but people need something to moan about now that we're quite good. I like this. And I'll tell you why I like it. Because actually a few days ago on the pod, when I think we were reacting to Thomas Tuchel's comments about the Wembley atmosphere. And I said, look, atmosphere, I think, is an issue in English football. I don't think it's a problem exclusive to Arsenal. I don't think it's a problem exclusive to any other club. I feel like the atmospheres in England are lacking. And they're lacking for a number of reasons. We don't have ultra sections. And I know that ultras bring problems as well. But we don't have those kind of specified singing sections. I mean, you look at the Emirates and you'd argue that, in the North Bank, they do it, and the Ashburton Army provide a bit down the other end of the stadium. You'd argue that at Anfield, it's the Kop end. You'd argue that at Old Trafford, it's the Stretford end, for example, right? So, at Tottenham, you'd say it's the new South Stand. Like, we kind of have areas that we expect to generate more atmosphere in a stadium, but there are so many reasons why English football atmosphere is lacking. And I went into so many of those reasons on the pod just the other day. So I don't want to sit here and repeat myself. But my point is, I guess, I think Laura has a point here. I don't think the atmosphere at the Emirates is worse than it is at other grounds. But I think what's happened at the Emirates is we've kind of gone through this journey, haven't we? We first turned up there, took a bit of time to get used to it, to get our feet under the table, for it to kind of feel like home. And during the Wenger days, the end of the Wenger days, I must say, we weren't playing particularly well. We weren't challenging right at the top. There were empty seats. There wasn't that same buzz. There wasn't that same interest. When Mikel Arteta came in, obviously the first section of his tenure, if you like, was impacted by COVID. And for a long time, we didn't have that support. When we first returned from COVID, it felt like all the atmospheres were better, just generally across the board, because people were so grateful to be back at football that they were lapping it up and they were enjoying every single moment of it and they were making the most of it. And that was a result and as a consequence of having something that I think we'd become sort of almost immune to. It had become something that we were no longer really grateful for. We became complacent about the fact that we get to go to football on a weekly basis. But when COVID took that away, all of a sudden, getting back into the grounds, there was a real big buzz. Mikel Arteta and Arsenal have worked loads over the last few years to improve Emirates atmosphere. It's never been better, though, than that first season that we challenged for the Premier League title. And I'll tell you why. That was unexpected, and it was pure emotion, excitement, and buzz that was kind of transcending around the stadium and coming onto the pitch. And you could feel it, you know, when you went to the Emirates during that season. With the expectation comes less enjoyment. And with less enjoyment comes less buzz, less atmosphere, and all the rest of it. I think as a football club, we could do a hell of a lot more to improve this. And I think as a football club, we've got a responsibility to make sure that we're working all the time to make this as good as it can possibly be. And I think we've seen Arsenal take some steps, but then they've also shot themselves in the foot at times, right? So, for example, that dreadful tifo that we rolled out in the Champions League, like that sort of thing, it just makes people go, well, what the hell is the point? So I do think that there's room for improvement. I do think that there is a lot that we could be doing as a football club to improve things on that front. But I think Laura is bang on when she says the atmosphere at the Emirates is no worse than the majority of other grounds in the Premier League. That's the bit I want to add in there. But people need something to moan about now. We're quite good. The fact that we're talking about the atmosphere and not focused on what's going on the pitch all of the time, and that this is a talking point, is a good thing, because it means that we're not too bothered about what's going on the pitch right now, because it's all going really well. It's all going really smoothly. You look at the fact that, we're feeling a bit of a come down in the atmosphere. Again, that highlights that it had gotten to a high point that it was never at previously. So, yeah, I think it's an unpopular opinion that Laura puts across, but I think it's one with a lot of validity. So I like that. Thank you, Laura, for sending that in, and make sure you go over and check out Laura's page. Right, let's move on to the next one. This is an interesting one from the Arsenal Tom. Dennis Bergkamp needs to hold more blame for not travelling away in Europe, as it likely cost us a European trophy or two. Now, for those of you that are too young to remember, Dennis Bergkamp wouldn't fly. So when we had away games on the continent, sometimes Dennis would go if it was a journey that could be made via other means without it being too strenuous and too difficult. But if we were flying off, far, far away, Dennis Bergkamp wouldn't make the trip. And this fear that he had of planes, I think he explained it in a book. I think he was talking about an experience that he had while he was an Inter player, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, did Dennis Bergkamp not going to sort of, or failing to go to some of those European games, was that a problem? Did that cost us? I think it did. And I think the Arsenal Tom is absolutely right here. I'm not saying that we would have definitely won European silverware had Dennis Bergkamp been available, but this was one of our better players, one of our greatest players ever, who, had such huge influence over the side, but, wasn't available for a lot of those very demanding European fixtures. The Saxon says, Bergie travelled to plenty close games away, but not the ones that were too far away. A phobia is not his fault. Yeah, look, and let's be clear, nobody's sitting here and having a pop at Dennis Bergkamp and saying, Dennis Bergkamp, you're you're a disgrace, blah, blah, blah. No, like he had the phobia. And there wasn't really a great deal we could do about that. But I do think that we would have been far better equipped and more likely to have achieved more on the continent had Dennis been available for all of those games. And I did say that he attended a fair few, but those were the games where we could see him travel basically without maybe getting a plane, maybe going by car. But some of those journeys were just unrealistic. Like if you're traveling to Eastern Europe, it's not as easy, is it, as if you're going to France or to Belgium or whatever. So look, again, I don't want to say it's Dennis Bergkamp's fault and have a pop at him. I'm certainly not doing that, because people have phobias and they'd much prefer not to have the phobia, I'm sure. There's not much you can do about it other than seek help. And if that doesn't work, well, then what can you do? So I don't hold it against Dennis, but I do think that we would have been more competitive in Europe if Dennis was available for all of those games. And the granddaddy Guna says that one of the reasons Dennis Bergkamp stayed with us was because we didn't force him to fly. So it's great to see that our club were kind of sympathetic to the situation and understanding of Dennis's phobia and all the rest of it. But I don't think it's a wild take from the Arsenal Tom to say that it might have cost us a European trophy. The bit I disagree with is where he says needs to hold more blame. Blame is probably not the word I would use. I would probably phrase it like this. I'd probably say Dennis Bergkamp not being available for all of our European games impacted our chances. I think that's probably the way I would phrase it. But thank you for the submission. Right, let's move on to the next one. The Guna 11, he says, and this is going to be a controversial one, I'm sure. Get involved in the chat. Let me know your thoughts on this one. He says, I've seen enough. Havertz is better than Gyokeres and will walk straight back in. I think that it's always funny how those who really underrate Kai Havertz and fail to see his value and fail to understand what he brings to the team always kind of then completely switch sides when he's absent. Why? Because then it becomes very, very clear what we are missing. Now, I'm not saying that the Guna 11 is doing this, because with all due respect, mate, I don't know what your previous opinion and view has been on Kai Havertz, but I think this is twofold, right? So the first layer of this is Kai Havertz is a much better player than people give him credit for. Kai Havertz is much more impactful than people give him credit for. And he's a very, very important part of this squad and of this group. And to be without him is going to affect us. The other side of it, though, is to look at Victor Gyokeres' performances. And I don't think Victor Gyokeres' performances have been anywhere near as bad as some people are trying to make them out to be. I think Victor Gyokeres has done well in terms of stretching teams, in terms of getting into good positions. He's certainly had to go through a bit of an adaptation period. And I do feel like with every passing week, he's becoming more and more connected to the team. I didn't feel that he was as connected as I'd have liked him to be against West Ham. But in the 2 games prior, Olympiacos and Newcastle, I thought he did really, really well. And the thing that we had to factor in was that Victor Gyokeres had played 3 games basically in full in 7 days. And I think that's another big change that Victor Gyokeres is having to adapt to. I think, look, ultimately, I think we'd have got a better level out of Victor Gyokeres if Kai Havertz was available to support him. And I think they will bring the best out of each other. I don't think any one of them having to play every single minute of every single game in such a demanding and intense role is going to lead to them performing to their maximum. So I think they both have an impact on one another. Like, there are games where we watch Kai Havertz up front and we become frustrated. There are going to be games where we watch Victor Gyokeres up front and become frustrated, but being able to swap one for the other, making that change and refresh things. And obviously they bring slightly different problems to the opposition. I think that's going to serve us really well. Again, I'm not saying I've seen enough Havertz is better than Gyokeres and will walk straight back in the team, but I do think we've seen the impact of not having Kai Havertz even as an option. And I think if it was the other way around and it was just Havertz and Gyokeres was the one out, I think we'd be having a very similar discussion and conversation. So, yeah, I'm not going to jump on Victor Gyokeres, but we do miss Kai Havertz. So I kind of get where you're coming from. I just think that you are wrong to downplay Victor Gyokeres, I think actually what you need to look at and kind of zoom out and maybe focus on from a wider angle is actually one missing has an impact on the other and puts a strain. I think that's the right way to put it. It puts a strain on the other one, which then does not lead to them producing an optimum performance week in, week out. But again, thank you very, very much for the submission. Mattia, this is a really interesting one. He says, we have good defenders, but we concede so little chances and goals because of the way that Arteta sets us up. That's why if you have Mosquera or any other defender in, it's the same as if you have Saliba. That's why when people just say trust our defenders, we have to be careful what we wish for. This is a really interesting one. I think two things can be true at the same time. So we do have a very strong defensive structure because of the way that Mikel Arteta sets us up. That's undeniable. But we also have a very strong defensive structure because we have very good individual players and we have very committed individual players, all of the right mindset with regards to defending. So I think it's both. I think both things are true at the same time. I guess what Mattia's point is that you can't just throw bodies and bodies and bodies forward and say it's okay because we've got a back four that are brilliant in 1v1s. So we're going to be okay. I think we can take more risk than other teams can because of the fact that our individual defenders are such good players. But you leave any defender in a 1v1 situation, you are taking a risk. And it's a greater risk with some than it is with others. And when you're talking about Saliba and Gabriel and Timber in particular, you're talking about players who you would trust probably 8 times out of 10 to deal with a 1v1 defensive situation. But my point here is that it is a bit of both. And so if you were to leave Saliba and Gabriel exposed every single week, or Timber or Calafiori, whoever it might be playing in that back four, exposed week after week after week, eventually, and at some point, you'll be punished for it because we're playing in a league with a very high standard. We're playing in a league full of brilliant teams, full of brilliant players, full of clubs capable of going out and signing some of the best attacking footballers from the rest of the world. And so you're always going to run that risk. I think I get where Mattia is coming from in that the structure is the base of it. And if you start compromising on the structure and leaning too much on your individuals, then that could impact you. But I think where Arsenal maybe have learned a bit of a lesson is that they need to find that balance a little bit better. They need to get to that spot in between that little bit more. And I felt like we saw that at Newcastle away, where we took a few more risks in terms of how we were committing bodies forward and positioning. And although we conceded a few chances, we took those risks, but we also created a hell of a lot more than we have in any of those really big away games for quite some time. So I think it swings and roundabouts, but I think you're right to point out that the structure is key. I just don't think that you can dismiss the quality of the individuals and say it's only because of Arteta's structure. It's both. And so I think there is a world in which you can find that middle ground and it works brilliantly for us. Thank you very much, Mattia. Let's move on to the next one. Ironic Arsenal says on X, Skelly, Miles Lewis Skelly that is, deserved to keep his starting spot over Ricardo Calafiori. I think that when Ricardo Calafiori came into Arsenal, the idea was for him to play week in, week out. Unfortunately, injuries have been an issue, and last season was very stop and start for the Italian, and we never saw the best of him. Calafiori brings you a lot. He brings you a defensive solidity, not necessarily because he's the most disciplined positionally, but because he's a big guy. He's a centre-back by trade. He's tall, he's powerful. You're not really going to be able to clip balls over the top of him over and over again. And, you know, that is the type of profile that Mikel clearly likes in that position of the pitch. So, you know, you can see why Mikel signed Ricardo Calafiori. And as I say, last season was a season that was hampered by injuries, and we never really saw the best of him. Fast forward to the start of this season, and Ricardo Calafiori was fit. Ricardo Calafiori got the nod at Old Trafford, first game of the season, right? Opening weekend. What does he do? He goes to Old Trafford, defends impeccably well, and scores the winning goal. And he's never looked back since. His performances have been excellent at both ends of the pitch. The performance that really stood out to me from a defensive point of view was the one at Anfield, because my question mark around Ricardo Calafiori has always been, you know, a lot of the time we sort of wax in lyrical when we're praising what he does in the final third and as an attacking entity, but a lot of the time, you know, he can leave us exposed and defensively vulnerable. And the Liverpool away game was really interesting, because I was looking at Calafiori and thinking, what am I going to get from you today? Am I going to get a player who is, as he normally is, focused on influencing the game on the attacking side and may leave some spaces? And at Anfield against Mo Salah, I'm sorry, mate, but you just can't afford to do that. Or am I going to get a modified version of Ricardo Calafiori? Am I going to get a more disciplined version of Ricardo Calafiori? And it felt like there was a switch flicked. It felt like he went from all-out chaos merchant to, solid defender whose priority is not giving any space or freedom to a player of Mo Salah's quality. And I wonder if it had been someone else, someone lesser, would Calafiori have flicked that switch? I guess that's an interesting question, but ultimately he did it. And the fact that he did it and the fact that he performed so well defensively that day, it kind of said to me that, no, you know what? Ricardo Calafiori can do this job as an all-rounder. Maybe he needs to adjust his mindset and he needs to adjust his thinking going into different games. But he's still a very young man and he's got the capacity and the ability to grow and to develop further. So I thought that Calafiori started the season really, really strongly. And as I say, I don't think he's done much wrong. And because he's not done much wrong, I disagree with the idea that Lewis Skelly deserved to keep or deserves to be starting right now ahead of Calafiori. I think, look, if you felt that going into the season that Lewis Skelly maybe would feel a little bit unfortunate and a little bit hard done by that he was out, fine. But I think that Ricardo Calafiori has vindicated and justified Mikel Arteta's decision up until now with his performances this season. I think there was one half of one game. Was it Forest? I can't remember. It was the second half of one of our home games where I thought he looked poor defensively and he got taken off quite early on in the half. And I thought, yeah, that needed to happen today. But overall, I think he's been brilliant. I think he's had a really good season. And I get the sympathy for Miles Lewis Skelly. And I do feel like over the course of the campaign, he'll get his chances. And at his age, he shouldn't be stressing or worrying about it. But I disagree. I think Calafiori was brought in to be that guy. He couldn't be that guy last season. He came in at the start of this season. He hasn't put a foot wrong, and therefore he should be playing. And I think this is summed up really nicely. Miles Lewis Skelly has been great, but Calafiori has been better. And listen, there'll be games where, you know, one is suited more to the other. And that's the beauty of having this squad. But I don't think Calafiori is a talking point right now. I think he's been great at the start of the season and deserves to be in the team. Thank you, Ironic Arsenal. Let's move on. I think this is the last one from X, and then I'm going to ask you guys to put some of yours in the live chat as well. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to get some of your unpopular opinions so that we can dissect them for the remainder of the show. This one comes in from Jimmy O'Hare, who says, Madueke didn't score or assist for about 8 games, but he dribbled past a bunch of players like he did every single game for Chelsea and has somehow deluded claim or deluded people into thinking that he's progressed. I think this is harsh. I agree with you, Jimmy, that in terms of Madueke hitting that top level, okay, he has got to produce more in terms of goals and assists. I agree with that. And I do think that some of his performances since arriving at Arsenal have maybe been overblown a little bit because of the level of negativity sort of around that signing when it was first reported that it was close or that it was happening. So I kind of get why people might be overhyping Madueke's performances a little bit. But at the same time, dribbling past players is very, very important. And dribbling past players has created room and has created spaces for others in a way that we really weren't doing regularly and frequently enough before his arrival. So I think it's okay to say that Noni Madueke has been good, he's been impactful, he's been effective, but also at the same time say, do you know what? We could do with more goals and assists for him. I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I don't think I'd take it as far as you have, saying that people are kind of deluded into thinking that the guy's progressed. I think you've gone a bit strong there. But this is unpopular Arsenal opinion, so I suppose you're allowed. But I do think, yeah, there is some validity to the claim that he needs to do more goals and assist-wise. But all round, I think he's done well. I think he's done well. And I think perhaps more than anything, he's surprised people. And, you know, that has obviously impacted the way that he's viewed and the way that his performances are going to be broken down and analyzed. You know, that's just the way it is. That's a consequence of the negativity that surrounded the signing in the first place. Right. We are going to take a really, really short pause. When I come back, I want to get your unpopular Arsenal opinions from the live chat. We'll debate some of them. We'll discuss some of them. Yeah, looking forward to continuing on with the show. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, I'd really, really appreciate it if you could leave a like on the video if you're with us on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel as well if you're with us on YouTube. We're not far away from hitting 46,000 subscribers on YouTube. So we'd love to get there very, very soon. And then we can begin our road, our journey towards that 50,000 mark, which if we could get to by the end of the season, I would be over the bloody moon. A massive thank you as well to everybody that's signed up on Patreon over the last few days. We've had a new influx of members, which is great to see. What do you get on the Chronicles of a Gooner Patreon? You get access to every single episode of the podcast completely ad-free. You will get exclusive bonus episodes of the podcast after each match. Where we will do some video analysis that we aren't allowed for obvious reasons to do on YouTube. And of course, you get to become a part of our community. We've got a chat in the Patreon thing where we can all communicate. We can all have a chat. You got a direct line into me if there's anything that you want discussed, if there's any episodes that you want me to consider making or anything like that, or you just want to have a chat about the Arsenal, you can get in touch with me via that Patreon page. And we've got lots and lots of members, and a huge thanks to everyone who signed up in the last few days, as well as those that, of course, continue to support us. If you're interested, the link is in the description below. If you're watching us on YouTube, there's a QR code in the top left-hand corner of your screen that you can scan on your phone, and it will take you through to the page where you can sign up. It's just £3 a month, which is less than the price of a cup of coffee in London. Yes, it is. And someone questioned me the other day. I can't remember who it was in the chat when I said that I paid £7 for a Starbucks coffee in central London. And I was making the point that, you know, for half of that, you can be a Chronicles of a Gooner patron. But you know what? I'm going to get one today. I'm going to get one today on my way to work, just so I can send you a picture of the receipt. Anyway, right, let's move on to the live chat then. Let's take some of your unpopular opinions. We're going to do that right after this.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner with me, Harry Symeou. Like and subscribe. Can we get up to 100 likes on the live stream? I know it's the international break. I know people got better things to do than watch me talk about Arsenal during an international break. But if you've got any views, unpopular opinions, get them in the live chat. But also don't forget to like and subscribe and all that stuff. It really helps. Okay, let's take this one from Jid. Good to see you back in the chat, mate. I think it's been a while. I haven't seen you knocking about for a bit. He says, the high player turnover at Arsenal over the years is not about Arteta being ruthless. It's been unnecessary and destabilizing. Arteta giving up on players after half a season has not been good. Who specifically are we sort of talking about here? Because there are players that Arsenal have brought in that it was very, very clear, I think, very, very early on in their Arsenal careers that they were probably not up to the standard, that it probably wasn't going to work. Yeah, Jid, like, pop some names in there, because I assume you're talking about people like, for instance, Fabio Vieira, who I just don't think is good enough. Like, as much as I think there is talent there, and as much as I think in the right environment he can flourish and he can be a useful player, I disagree with the idea that players who aren't cutting it should be kept at Arsenal. I'm not saying that you should just cut ties with people really, really quickly and write them off and all the rest of it. And, I'm one of the people that probably talks about adapting and changing to different environments and transitional periods and all the rest of it more than most. So I do recognize all of that stuff. But I think as a manager, when you work with these players day in, day out, you have an idea. And that idea might not just be based on their footballing talent. It might be based on their attitude, their ability to integrate with the group, the relationships that they hold within the camp, etc., etc. I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot of reasons and a lot of factors behind why Mikel Arteta has let some players go. And I think sometimes that's, I don't know if it's a ruthlessness or if it's just a willingness to try and correct mistakes as early as possible. It's like I was having this conversation, and I think this is interesting, right? I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday about the situation at Nottingham Forest. Somebody said to me, look, Marinakis is, he sort of said to me earlier in the conversation that he's a very stubborn owner and that it's kind of his way or the highway. And then he said to me that he was ruthless. And then he told me about the story linking Sean Dyche with the job. And that, that was a kind of indication of how ruthless Marinakis can be. And I suppose, yes, you can look at it that way and say, if he's appointed a manager 8 weeks ago and he's going to give him the chop already, then that probably does show a ruthless side and a ruthlessness. But is it always ruthlessness, or is it sometimes somebody wanting to correct what they believe is an issue before it becomes an even bigger problem? Like, had Fabio Vieira, and Jid hasn't mentioned Fabio Vieira for those of you listening, but that's the name that kind of jumped into my mind when you suggested that we were kind of giving up on players too early. I think with someone like Fabio Vieira, the longer you hold on to them, the more their value tanks. The more their value tanks, the harder it is to move them on. And then we end up in that realm where we're all talking about Arsenal being really crap sellers. So I think actually seeking to correct mistakes early when they're clearly a mistake and there isn't a feeling anymore that it can turn around or develop into what you want it to be, I don't think that's a bad thing. I really don't. Big shout out to Mr. Sooty. He says, unpopular opinion, winning games 1-0 or 2-0 is acceptable. A win is a win. I've seen loads of fans lose their heads because we only beat Olympiacos and West Ham by only 2 goals. I completely agree with this. When you're asking a team to play 3 games in 7 days, you are not going to get a premium level of performance in every single one of those games. No matter how good your squad is, no matter how much depth you've got, no matter how much you can rotate, you will not see 10 out of 10 performance. Impossible. It's pretty much impossible. As long as we are picking up the results, who the hell cares? Because the reason we got through, and we had those 3 games in 7 days, we had Newcastle away, we won it. Olympiacos, we won it. West Ham, we won it. Okay? So people can say that, some of the performances weren't what we wanted them to be. We should have scored more against Olympiacos. We should have scored more against West Ham. We were able to give what we gave at Newcastle because we could go into Olympiacos essentially at 70%, trusting the squad, trusting our ability to get over the line and still achieve what we wanted to achieve. And we've done that. And then the West Ham game comes around. And again, you've played Sunday, Wednesday, and then you're playing Saturday again. And we were able to do that because we arguably cruised through the Champions League game. So it's about, and I've said it before, it's kind of like, yeah, there is a bit of a risk element, and you are taking risk a little bit because you are almost banking to a degree on things kind of going the way that you want them. But when you've got the defense that we have and the margins don't need to be as big as they are maybe for other teams, then that obviously helps in that. And I agree with you. It might be an unpopular opinion to some, but I agree with it. Augustine says, unpopular opinion, I see Eze doing better in a 10 role, midfield role, than on the wings. I don't think that's a particularly unpopular opinion. I think that most people feel that to get the best in the top level out of Eberezer, you're going to want to have him in those central areas. And I would argue that when he plays from the left, he will have that license to drift into those areas and do what he can to get into those positions. But I think for me, his most impressive display yet was that one up at Newcastle. where I thought he was brilliant. Adopted a shoot on sight policy, was happy to take on opportunities when they came his way. That was the kind of the performance I came away from going, yeah, this is what we signed him for. This is the guy that we signed. And so yeah, I think moving him in central areas is going to help us. I think you're going to see that over the next few weeks. We don't know for sure how long Martin Odegaard's going to be out, but I think there's a good chance that you're going to see Eza playing in those positions, and he's a more than capable deputy. Some would argue that on current form, he's in a better place than Martin Odegaard. So yeah. Finn Muller says Nicolas Pepe, this is his unpopular opinion, has been a better transfer than many of the £100 million transfers we've seen. You know what? You're right. There's been some real flop signings, hasn't there, over the years? There's been a lot of big moves that just didn't bring what they were expected to bring, that just didn't, reflect what they were supposed to reflect. And that's just the nature of football. I always say this, every transfer carries an element of risk, and every transfer, has that potential to go one way or the other. And I think you've got to be mindful of that when you make these signings. The idea is to, when you're spending big money, to minimize the risk that you're taking in terms of the player that you go for. But look, in hindsight, Nicolas Pepe wasn't as bad as he was made out to be at the time. I used to argue that quite a lot, by the way. But obviously, Mikel Arteta wasn't really feeling it, and it wasn't his signing, and therefore he probably didn't have the same patience with Nicolas Pepe that he did with others that maybe he brought in, because he'd done the research, he'd done the homework, and he felt like eventually they were going to come good. Again, it's a game of opinions, and it's a game of opinions when it comes to managers making decisions on transfers and certain players, and who they're going to stick with and who they're going to give more time to versus who they're not. So it's an interesting debate, but I think you've got a point there. I don't think he was anywhere near as bad as he was made out to be, and there have been much higher value transfers that went even worse than that one, for sure. Okay, let's see what else you guys are saying in the live chat box. Remember, if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're brand new, check us out on Patreon. The link is in the description below. Go over and check it out. Right, let's move on to this next one from Obadiah, who says, unpopular opinion, Theo Walcott's Arsenal career has been underrated by Arsenal fans, given the number of goals he scored for us and his impact using his pace in big games. Yeah, I think Theo Walcott was a figure that at times, was sort of associated with Arsenal not being good enough during that period of time. And I think that was a little bit harsh. The guy was signed at an incredibly young age. You remember when he got taken to the World Cup at a ridiculously young age? And so there was this crazy hype around the kid that, unfortunately, I don't think he was ever able to live up to. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't a good Premier League player in his own right. Nearly 400 appearances for Arsenal, 397, 108 goals. So more than a 1 in 4 man, better than a 1 in 4 man. It's not the end of the world, is it? And as far as I'm concerned, if you score 100 goals for Arsenal, you've got to be of a certain standard and of a certain level. I do think there's a little bit of disrespect that comes his way, but I think it's just lazy analysis, really, or non-contextual analysis, where you think about, he scored 100 goals, over 100 goals for Arsenal. Look at the list of players that's achieved that, and then if you look at that, regardless of what your kind of opinion or what's the word, like stereotypes are of Theo Walcott, you look at the company he's in, and you have to give him credit. You have to give him flowers for that. LX4D says, keep up the great work, Harry. This is my first time catching a live stream. Thank you so much for being here, mate. Really, really appreciate it, and glad you're enjoying the live stream. Unpopular opinion from Mikey, who says, carefully managing the playing time of Miles Lewis-Skelly, Ethan Nwaneri, and Max Dowman is to their benefit. Look at the young players at Barca like Gavi and Lamine. They've now played a lot of games at a very young age. Yeah, and while that's done them great in terms of their profiles and everybody being able to see how good they are and what they can bring, look at the injury problems that they're having as well at these really young ages. And you don't want that, do you? We've seen it with players like Wayne Rooney, where quite early on in their careers where they probably had a lot more to give, their bodies didn't have any more to give because they'd been playing so much from such a young age. And yeah, at that age, you've got that enthusiasm, but a 32-year-old in great condition who's got all the experience and the know-how, you'd probably rather be that than be at your absolute peak when you're 18. Do you see what I mean? So I agree with this. I think managing them carefully is important. I think it's important that they have the right people around them, though. Like Miles isn't starting at the moment. Neither is Ethan. Ethan was left out of the squad at Newcastle because the squad was just too big. But it's important that the reasons for that are communicated to them and that they are mature enough to kind of take that on board. At their ages, and the same with Max Dowman as well, at their ages, they do not need to worry right now about playing time. That will come. I get that you want to play. I get that you want to, be developing and furthering your career. I get that these kids and their families have worked incredibly hard to get them to the position that they're in today. But there's no need to panic at this age would be my kind of point on this. And actually, you've seen it in the past where players who were pushing really hard and people felt there was no chance essentially of leaving them out because of what they were doing. Those players ended up burning out really, really early on. So I think that's a really good point, Mikey. Sampa says, Harry, you'd think that we were slapping up teams by 5-0 in that 03-04 season, but that wasn't the case. We had 7 1-0 wins. I haven't looked back at that to check, but I'll take your word for it because it sounds about right. I think you're right. Again, when you've got that solidity, when you've got that structure, the margins don't need to be as big in order for you to win a football match. So, yeah, here we are. AJ says, big good afternoon, by the way, to just saying afternoon wherever you are. It's morning here. AJ says, unpopular opinion, even if Mikel Arteta doesn't win a trophy this season, the context as to why would have to be analysed because the team is stable, contracts are being renewed, and the players believe in him. The pressure for him to win a trophy may be overstated. There are a lot of people out there that if I say he doesn't need to win a trophy, will jump on my back. But if we look, I'm not saying that if he doesn't win a trophy, he should be sacked. I think that's so knee-jerk and so unnecessary as a kind of narrative to be peddling at this stage of the season. But I think if we don't deliver, people are well within their rights to ask questions. However, it depends on why that happens. It depends on, again, like you say, what the context is, because the health of the club overall is very good. You mentioned the contract renewals. You mentioned you think about the value of our squad. You think about how we're viewed now. We're in a much better space than we were previously. But like if Mikel Arteta was to take us to the Champions League final and Bukayo Saka misses a penalty in the 91st minute and then we lose on penalties in the final, are you going to sack Mikel Arteta for that? If we go to the final day of the season and we lose the league on goal difference because Liverpool put 7 past someone, are you going to sack Mikel Arteta for that? So this thing of, I'm going to sack him if he doesn't win a trophy, full stop, I think that's too harsh. But that doesn't mean I don't expect and I don't want us to deliver this season. I don't think we should deliver this season. I absolutely think we should. I absolutely think that we have to, get over the line this season in something. But I agree with AJ's point in that the context needs to be analysed. If you're going to think about making that decision that some people are suggesting should be made if Arsenal fail to win silverware, then you have to analyse the bigger, broader picture. Also, who would you bring in? Are they going to be better? That's another thing that you got to factor in and consider, because otherwise you end up like a lot of other clubs where you just sack, and you're just going around in this never-ending cycle. And I'm sorry, but you don't build the stability that we have right now by adopting that method. You just don't. You might garner short-term success, but you do not build stability. And stability, I think, is important in terms of sustained success. Let's move on. Sooty, thank you, mate. The first person that says I don't look like a twat with my head shaved and my beard gone. So thank you very much. Ella says, unpopular opinion, the 25-26 third kit is better than the 22-23 away kit. Hold on, let me just make sure I'm getting these right in my head. The 22-23 Arsenal away kit was the black and gold kit, and you're talking about the 25-26 Arsenal third kit, which I think is the white one, right? No, Ella. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you for listening and thank you for contributing. But I have to disagree with you here. I can't have that. That Arsenal black kit with the gold trimmings is elite. That is the best kit for me that Arsenal have produced in years and years and years and years. And I won't have anybody tell me otherwise. Thank you for your contribution, as I say, but I strongly disagree. What else have we got? Let's pick out one or two more before we sign out for the morning. Just scrolling through the chat. What have we got here? What have we got? I'm trying to pick something that isn't similar to what we've already discussed. Paul James says, I'm an older Arsenal fan. Unpopular opinion, our fans say that they want entertaining football, when in truth, they'd happily accept boring football and winning big trophies. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I grew up in the Wenger era, right? I was 6 when Wenger took over. So if I'm being honest, all of my Arsenal memories are shaped and my Arsenal opinions are shaped by the Arsene Wenger era. And yes, I prefer to see us play good football. And yes, I used to hold that up as a win against my friends when we were debating and discussing football when we were kids and we were younger, growing up, etc., etc. But talk to someone like my dad, who's like, I don't care. Give me the George Graham days any day if it means we're winning. Because ultimately, winning is what matters. And if you win, everything else is a side point, really, isn't it? So, yeah, I get that. I get that. I do. I think Ella's sparked quite the debate with regards to those kits. Lots of people getting into that in the live chat. The white kit's brilliant. It is. I like it. But it's not as good as that black one. I'm sorry. Like, you know, with the black one, I felt like I could wear it like in different environments. I'm not really that guy that like turns up to like a party or a restaurant or something in an Arsenal shirt. It's not really me. But with the black one, I was more open to it for sure. For sure. What else have we got? Paul just responding to the point they made earlier. Says he grew up in the Bertie Mee and later George Graham eras. Winning trumps everything. He actually does. Mikey B says the so-called need to win has been weaponized by those who have an interest too. Yeah, I think we've talked about it before. The analysis around Arsenal from some of the big name pundits is quite frankly ridiculous, if you ask me. And they will use the "we need to win" thing to kind of to create an agenda and to essentially, I sound like a conspiracy theorist here. That's not what I'm seeking to be or do. My point is that, and it's the same with other clubs as well, right? Narrative is what football coverage is all about nowadays. Nobody sits down and talks about the tactical intricacies of a game anymore, not on mainstream TV anyway. Nobody sits and talks about the football itself. What do? We focus on the things that provide and create the biggest narratives, i.e. VAR decisions, referees, people's needs to win, people being sacked, and they try and spark a reaction that a lot of the time is negative when at times it probably doesn't need to be. So I agree with that. I do. Right, guys, I am going to love you and leave you. Thank you so much for being with me on this Monday morning. I know it's the international break. I know the shows are not as newsful or as relevant in terms of their sort of validity at the time as they might be during periods where we got games coming thick and fast and there's lots of news stories to unpack and to discuss. Well, I appreciate you guys sticking with me during the international breaks because it's tough for me as well in terms of coming up with things to do content wise. We've done Unpopular Opinions Volume 2 today. The other day we did what was it called? What did we do? Would You Rather, where we talked Arteta, Wenger, we talked Alexis or Fabregas. We did some interesting bits there, so you can go and check that one out. Also, we did a bit about Zubimendi yesterday, reacting to his interview in The Guardian and talking about some of Arsenal's upcoming fixtures. So if you haven't checked out yesterday's episode, go over and do that if you are interested. Don't forget, before you sign out, leave us a like on the video. It really, really does help. Subscribe to the channel. If you are new, leave us a review as well. And check us out on Patreon. The QR code's in the top corner of your screen. Thank you to everyone who signed up over the last few days. Remember, you get ad-free access to every single episode. You get access to our bonus episodes after every single match. And you get to be a part of our community. And you've got a direct line into everyone else that's a patron, and me, of course, so we can stay in contact and have a chat. I'll see you all soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Simi U time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.